All right, welcome. My name is Will Moss. I am the CEO of HBCU Connect. I'm going to be your host this evening for our special recruitment event with Wayfair, presented by HBCU Connect. We are super excited. This is our first event actually with Wayfair, so we're excited about the opportunities that they have. We're excited about meeting the team members that have graciously volunteered their time to share the different opportunities on their teams and a little bit about what they do at Wayfair. And you all as candidates have been hand selected to attend this event to learn more and potentially land an interview and potentially land a job after this event. So we're going to get into those details and an official introduction, but I wanted to just make sure everyone knows that they're in the right place and there are going to be some great opportunities shared this evening. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the first things I like to do at our recruitment events is go through the agenda so that you all know what to expect at this evening's recruitment event. So that agenda will include a brief 2 to 3 minute welcome from myself. Then I will introduce our keynote speaker from Wayfair, who's Kiana Smeedle, Global Head of Culture and Inclusion. Then once Kiana has finished up with the keynote, then we will introduce our panelists from the Wayfair team that have graciously shared their time to share their experiences, to answer a few of the panel discussion questions that I've come up with to ask the team to help, be an advocate for you all as candidates to learn more about Wayfair, what it's like to work at Wayfair, the culture, the opportunities, and then also we want to give you a chance to ask questions live utilizing the chat. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Make sure you know how to leverage the chat because we are going to be keeping an eye on the chat to answer your questions as we go along, as well as during our live Q&A, I will be asking some of the questions that I see in the chat to our panelists. All right, then once we finish up with the live Q&A and our panel discussion, I'm going to pass it over to Maureen Gilroy, who's a recruiting manager at Wayfair, to talk about continuing the conversation and next steps. All right, so now that we've kind of gone over the agenda, let me give you a brief welcome on myself and HBCU Connect. I think it's important for me to always do this at our events because my team, a lot of you may have heard from a member of my team or a recruiter on my team to invite you to be a part of our network on HBCU Connect to take advantage of this special opportunity to learn more about Wayfair. So this could be your first interaction with HBCU Connect or first event that you've attended from HBCU Connect, but we like to welcome you, and to all of those folks that are already a part of HBCU Connect that heard about this event through maybe an email that you received from myself or someone on my team, we'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us. We cannot do these events without you, so super excited to have you here. A little bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of HBCU Connect. Started the site as a passion project back in 1999. Graduate of Hampton University with a computer science degree. So I kind of rolled up my sleeves, built out a social network, and here we are today. We started working with employers that were looking to recruit diverse talent, specifically from HBCUs, and started doing events to help employers physically connect and meet some of the folks that are a part of our network in person. Fast forward to 2020, unfortunately, COVID-19 hit, and we went from hosting these events physically in different locations all over the country to hosting the events online. So kudos to companies like Wayfair for investing the time and effort to connect with you all through this online virtual event platform. So you'll still have the same opportunity, for careers after the event. The intent of this event is for Wayfair to connect with you and potentially make hires from this event. So I know a lot of you are probably familiar with career fairs and different events where you might go and you might meet a company, but maybe you never hear from that company after the event. Well, this event is different. This is an event specifically for making connections that potentially could lead to hires after the event. So you are in the right place, not only to learn more, but to network and potentially land an opportunity. So that's what this is about, folks. So you're in good hands. And that is my brief welcome of myself. So let me go ahead without further ado and introduce our keynote, who is Kiana Smeedle, Global Head of Culture and Inclusion at Wayfair. So Kiana, if you're ready.
Oh, I'm always ready. It's wonderful to be here with everyone. Excited to see the faces that I can see now and looking forward to seeing some faces later as well. So, I was asked to kick off a little bit with like a personal story of my professional journey, answering some questions around where I'm from originally. And whenever I see that question, it just makes me think of the movie Easy A. And so, if you have not seen that scene, I highly suggest you Google it. There is a white family who has adopted a child of color. And at one point, the dad says, "So, where are you from originally?" And it feels a little bit like that. I'm from Massachusetts originally. I've been here all of my life, grown up right outside of Boston. And actually, my family's connections to Boston run pretty deep. So, my mom's side of the family, my grandmother is the oldest of 18 children who all grew up on the same street in Dorchester and Mattapan when I was younger. And so we just had so many cousins and so many aunts and uncles that we said anybody who was 19 and younger was a cousin, and anybody who was 20 and older was an aunt and an uncle. So when I think about Boston, I think about my family. I think about the family church that we used to belong to. And I think about how my cousins used to tease me because I was their cousin from the sticks. Um, I know that also part of the reason why my family moved to where we did and away from the rest of their family was because of a busing crisis that happened right when my mom was going to enter high school. And so there's a history that comes with Boston that really is why I do this work and why I do this work where I do this work, because I want to help to change that. And I've seen the way that Boston has invested in creating that change and wanting to let other folks know there are people of color here and we can thrive and work well here. And that Wayfair has provided amazing opportunities. So that's a little bit about my personal background. I will share my professional journey. My very first job at 15 years old was working in food service at a nursing home, so in the Alzheimer's clinic. And so that was a very interesting space to be in at 15 years old. You really gain an appreciation for people's experiences, what they've been through, for your own memory, and a lot of other things. I think the job that I most frequently reflect on is the one that I had the most fun at before Wayfair, and that was working as the concert liaison at Strawberries Music and Video. So, Strawberries Music and Video, for those of you who were born, you know, probably in the 90s, was this place that sold CDs and DVDs. And those were things that you had before you had MP3s. And so it was just an awesome place to be for new releases, things as they were coming out. Everybody would come into the store and ask about the new artist this, or the new CD that, or this new movie. And I got to talk to people about movie and music and influencing the culture. And I really loved that. But I was doing that work while I was going to school. So both for undergraduate and graduate school, as well as postgraduate, I worked full time. And it's because I had to. I was raised by a single parent. And so there wasn't this option of something to fall back on or somebody to cover your expenses if you couldn't meet those. And also, for a period of time, my family was homeless when we were in high school. And so I was still helping my mom to kind of catch up to some debts that we had incurred while we were homeless, while I was in college. And so for me, I just remember this strong sense of I want to belong and I want to find other folks who are having these disjointed experiences like I am, just so that I don't feel alone. And so that I feel like I can be a little bit bolder, a little bit braver, a little bit more myself. And that informed a lot of the work that I wanted to do. So my undergraduate degree is in human services. My graduate degree is an MBA with a concentration in HR management. And then my postgraduate degree is in organizational learning and development. So for me, I've just kind of been building on these pieces of understanding people and, serving people, putting together teams and how teams work in organizations, and then ultimately how do they function and how can they function well, and then applying a lens of inclusion to all of that work. So my professional journey, I guess, includes stops at Harvard University, where I got to be the first in some cases. So the first person to help build out the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, building a post-bac program that Harvard had never had before, seeing some success there. But also being the first person of color who worked in the dean's office at the medical school, and doing that at 23 years old and not knowing that that was a thing at the time. And so I've taken those experiences of being first and tried to at least leave my mark on places so that other folks coming along feel like they can be more themselves in those places, because those places are changed since I've been there. Doing this DEI work, I've been at Wayfair for just over 2 years. And so came in as the first person to lead DEI globally and really found an organization with so many individuals that were ready to contribute to change and making a difference in a really positive way, that I didn't have to have a team when I first started. I met folks like Maureen, and we would sit down and we would talk about what is it she's trying to do on her team? How can I help to support that? Any coaching or guidance that they needed, and they were off to the races. And I was like, happy to support them. And that's kind of how the work has grown at Wayfair, very organically. And then as we've been going along, we've been getting leadership support too. And so it's become part of the culture that we have conversations around DEI. We talk about not just diversifying our workforce, but providing equitable opportunities for folks to be able to grow their careers at Wayfair, and also combining that with the culture. So in my title, I have culture and inclusion, and that's because I lead the culture and engagement teams as well as the DEI teams. And so you'll see that in our people principles, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that there's this idea of really understanding who are the people at Wayfair and how do we help them be successful, and applying this lens of equity and inclusion. So that's just a little bit, or maybe a little bit more about me than you were looking for. But I'm happy to keep us going and just talk a little bit more about Wayfair as well as an organization. So we're going to jump into these slides around who we are. And essentially, you see some things here on the page, but for those of you who may not know us, Wayfair we are an e-commerce company, and we sell furniture, we sell home goods, and we sell them all online. And so we're about to celebrate our 20-year anniversary, which just seems truly amazing. But when we started at Wayfair, we started with this idea of buying big, bulky items online. And so for us, that was revolutionary, we thought, and a lot of other folks thought that was revolutionary as well. And it still feels like the e-commerce space in home buying, home accessories, furniture, and the like is still very new. And so there are a number of people who say, oh, Wayfair, I think you sell furniture, right? And we say, yes, we do that, but we also are a technology company. And so what powers our ability to get you the items that you're looking for are the tech platforms that we have built. So we both have the logistics and supply chain side of our business, as well as the technology that powers all of that work to come together really nicely. And so just so you all know, no, we are not a furniture maker. So we do not make the things that we sell. We partner with our suppliers. We say suppliers are our family, to be able to offer you the wide variety of items that you see on our websites. And so there are some stats that you see here across our customer base, how many suppliers we have, the number of employees, and you'll see why we say suppliers are our family, because they have grown with us along with our employee base. And that's really important to us. And then particularly calling out the number of engineers that we have as well on this slide. So that's just a little bit generally about Wayfair and who we are. And on this next slide here, what you'll see are just some quick facts and figures that give you an overview of Wayfair in a nutshell and the landscape that we're playing in. So we have many key areas of focus, and different folks are going to talk about different parts of the business with you later today. But this is really what we kind of keep top of mind, in that we keep hearing again and again from our leadership that will truly help us drive our success in this space in the home market. So I mentioned to you the call out around our suppliers, for which we have over 16,000 suppliers all over the world, and that suppliers are part of our family. So they are just a really critical part of our supply chain, which you may have been hearing about in the news generally, all these supply chain issues that have been impacting so many organizations. And for us, having a really wide and diverse supplier base has allowed us to kind of keep going, to have a bunch of different products that we can offer you that are maybe like the thing that you like on screen, that can get to you sooner. And so we really invest in those relationships to make sure that we can, at the end of the day, meet the needs of our customers. And so I mentioned a little bit too about that customer experience, and this goal of increasing engagement, which means that we will likely have repeat customers. So on that last slide, you saw that we have 31 million active customers, and you see how this is all interconnected. So treating our suppliers well, it helps us to bring to our customers what they are looking for in a timely manner. And the way that we do all of that are through these 4 areas that you see here in this middle kind of white-ish section. And so these are all different teams, different platforms, different services that we offer within the organization. On the next slide, you'll see this header that Wayfair is our marquee brand. And so what we mean by that is when we talk about Wayfair as an organization, we're talking about all of the companies that make up Wayfair, right? So you can go online and you can shop All Modern, you can shop Paragold. All of those are part of the Wayfair branded family, but you can also go to wayfair.com and purchase items from there as well. And so that really is the brand that is most well known, because that is the brand that has been around for the longest. And as we can continue to grow our business, both nationally and internationally, we're exploring these other brands that speak to who are our customers, what's their style, and really finding something that speaks to you and that is just right for you. And then on the next slide, what you'll see here is a little bit about our portfolio. So I mentioned Wayfair being the marquee brand, and just to give you a sense of kind of scale and scope, that particular website, wayfair.com, has over 22 million products across different styles and price points. So really it's this sense of, hey, if I go to wayfair.com, I'm very likely to find something that I like, and that's a great place for you to start. If you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, but you know what room in your home you're designing for, or that, you know, I want to make over my dorm room, or that I'm trying to elevate my style because I just landed my first job and I want to look more adult, right? It gives you just this really broad kind of palette to start from. As we get a bit more specific, that starts to curate a certain style, a certain price point, other things, as you move up the pyramid here. And so Wayfair as a whole, we like to focus on mass market customers. We're trying to say anybody and everybody should be able to see themselves as a customer at Wayfair. And that's really our hope and our goal, that we're able to provide you with what you're looking for when you're looking for it. And to me, what I love about that is that it really speaks to inclusion, you know, that we can curate what is right for you and that will work for you in the moment that you need it. So this is a nice pivot and segue to the people principles that I had also mentioned earlier. So what you see listed here are these 9 people principles that are organized in these 3 pillars, are how we refer to them. So the 3 pillars being we drive results, we win together, and we are always improving. And these 9 people principles are truly how we define how you can be successful at Wayfair, the behaviors that we're looking to see you exhibit while you're at Wayfair, and how we hire, inspire, assess, and develop our people. So really trying to weave them into the culture so that they both inform the culture and are informed by the culture. And these were shared, they were created and shared within the last year, just over a year, based on feedback that we heard from people, how they described how they were successful at Wayfair, how they described what it felt like to work on a team and operate and collaborate effectively, the importance of respecting others, of innovation and improvement and adapting and growing, and those being innovating, thinking about the work that we're doing on the team, but then personally being able to grow and develop at Wayfair. So those are just a few examples of kind of how we came to this language that you see here for you on the screen. And so this is really when you start, where these are the foundational pieces of understanding Wayfair and how to be successful. And then on the next slide, you get a little bit more about our DEI initiatives. And so Again, I think we like to work in triads. There are 3 buckets here, but you can learn a little bit more about what we've done both at scale and about the culture of Wayfair by clicking on these links, and we can share these out with you in the chat as well. But if you go to aboutwayfair.com, you can look under our impact and you can learn both about corporate responsibility, about our DEI initiatives, and so much more to get a better understanding of holistically, what do we mean when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion at Wayfair? And also, we released earlier this year our first DEI annual report to give you a sense of the work that we've been doing, at least since I've joined, and some of the work that has predated me, some of the successes that we've had, and the areas of opportunity that we see. Under real people and real conversations. So I don't know if you can kind of clock the setting around me, but I am in what I have been referring to as my she bunker. So I have an office down in the basement, but it is very reflective of me and of who I am, and has been wonderfully curated by select items from Wayfair. But this is the space from which, if we're having company conversations, I'm talking to you from this space. And it's important to me because this is the space in which I feel most comfortable and like I can be myself. And I want other folks to know that. I want them to ask questions about the Uno card deck that they can see, or any of the things that I have behind me or on my desk, because I want them to get to know me, or at least to get a sense of who I am. And so I realized that for myself and wanted to check in and see how many other folks at Wayfair felt the same. And so that generated this discussion series that we have called Change Starts at Home, where we invite people primarily from our employee resource groups, but we truly welcome anybody to share a bit about their story. You know, what has impacted them both positively and negatively about any experience that they've had related to their identity. And then using that as an opportunity for our organization to learn, develop, and grow by creating action plans to help prevent, you know, a lack of sense of belonging, or to dig in more into some of the data that we share. And so that's what you'll see here. If you're interviewing at our organization, we have a culture ambassador program. And the point of that program is you identify a certain way and want to ensure that you speak to somebody who shares that same identity or a similar dimension in common with you, you have that opportunity. And what you're going to talk to them about is the culture at Wayfair. How have they found it here? That conversation is not part of the interview process, in that it's not recorded, or there aren't notes from there that are shared in the decision around whether or not you'll be hired. That is a time for you to be able to ask the questions that you feel are important to you, but maybe are not necessarily right for you to ask the interviewer. And then the celebration of Heritage Month. So you'll see on Wayfair at Work, our external social media channels, we love to celebrate our people. We love to celebrate people's cultures, and we love to welcome them to tell us how they would like to be celebrated. So you can see a bit more about that. And then on this right-hand pillar, this is where we get into all of the partnerships that we have that reflect our inclusive values. So making sure that we're expanding that to reflect who is here at Wayfair, what are they telling us that they would like to see us invest in, how would they like to see us create partnerships to support their identities, or support other identities. And that's how we've kind of built this list. And huge shout out to Maureen and that team, because essentially I think all of the partnerships listed on this list have started with her and that team. And so we've been really thankful to them, including this opportunity that we have here with HBCU Connect. Okay, and then I'm going to be quiet after this, but huge shout out to our employee resource groups. They are amazing. I'm going to let you kind of read through this slide a little bit here, but I would also love to call out a few of the pun names that we have listed here. And these are not necessarily my favorite groups overall. I'm just saying their names are something to note. So like Way Out is our LGBTQIA plus group. Way Black needs no explanation. Waysians, just gonna leave it there. So we really ask people to help us to understand what's going on in their communities, I mentioned celebrating Heritage Months, and our ERGs take the lead there with us helping to guide them. But also, if your community is in a time of crisis, what's going on? What kind of support would you like to see? And then we can help kind of run that up the chain. And so we've had so much success with our employees raising their hand saying, I want to get involved. And this is one very clear way that you can do that starting from day one. So just, take a look there. You can explore our ERGs when you go to aboutwayfair.com. And thank you so much for listening to me share a little bit about myself, about Wayfair, and specifically about some of the DEI work that we've been doing.
Awesome, Kiana. If it's okay, I'd like to ask a quick follow-up question and then invite any of our candidates, if you have questions specifically for Kiana, please drop those questions in the chat, and then I'll try to get to them before we go and introduce our panelists. But Kiana, thank you for being our keynote, first of all. And just wanted to, I always like to kind of dig in a little bit for context around, how folks got their foot in the door at Wayfair and what was your career path to Wayfair. So if you can talk a little bit about how you got your foot in the door at Wayfair, and I know you touched on your career path already, but I think that little detail might be interesting.
Sure. So Wayfair was the second organization ever in my career that reached out to me. And they reached out to me because they said, we saw your profile on LinkedIn. And I said, wow, it really is worth the investment to be on LinkedIn, because I was questioning it at that time. But the reason why they reached out to me was not for a job. It was actually because they were thinking about a head of DEI role, and they saw that I was currently in a similar role and wanted to know what has helped me to be successful, what have been some roadblocks, so that they could architect the job in the right way. And I thought, well, that's fun. And let me just kind of share with you some of my thoughts, because I am always sharing my thoughts, even if people don't ask for them. And then by the end of that conversation, I remember hanging up the phone and going, if I just built my dream job and I don't get the opportunity to interview for it, I'm going to be really annoyed. And so the next day, the recruiter that I had talked to reached out and said, I don't know if by, any way you'd be interested in this, but I would love to connect you with the hiring manager. And that's kind of how it went. And so I share that with you all because I want to be honest. One, invest in LinkedIn is what that story told me. Make sure that your information is up to date and that it tells a story about what you've been doing and what you're interested in doing. And then I think too, I will share with you. So I mentioned my first kind of professional job was working at Harvard Medical School in the dean's office. That job I did not apply for. I applied for a job working in the dorms at the med school. And actually they were like kind of in a basement. So I guess I wound up in a basement anyway. But I remember I interviewed for that job and I met with the HR woman afterwards. And she told me, they're going to make you an offer. I want you to tell them to wait and that you have to think about it. And I'm going to have you interview at the dean's office. And I told her, oh, I didn't apply for that job. And she said, I'm going to have you interview at the dean's office. And I was like, okay. And then she told me, and wear a suit. And I was like, oh, but I, had on like a skirt and a shirt that had like a bow. I thought I was fancy. And I was like, so I could just wear this. And she's like, I need you to wear a suit. So I went out and I got a suit and it was uncomfortable. And I interviewed for this job at the dean's office and they offered me that job. And so I had two offers. And I said, I think I would be more comfortable working with the students in the dorms. And she said, I know that. And that's why I don't want you to do it. I want you to push yourself to be uncomfortable. And so I share that because I have noticed in looking back that there have been opportunities that other people were putting in front of me that I kind of shied away from. And so there are a lot more organizations like Wayfair that are reaching out to people because they see you out there. They see something in you and what you're kind of describing in your work. And don't walk away from that. I think have the conversation, understand what they're looking for, and worst case scenario, that just tells you how to rephrase what you have listed on your profile in the first place. But definitely take those calls, network, have those conversations, and listen to the people who are telling you something that you might miss otherwise.
Excellent point. So I saw a question from one of our candidates, and actually there's a few questions for you that you might take a look at once you finish speaking. But that question was around culture. So can you speak to what is it that you like most about the Wayfair culture?
What I like most about the Wayfair culture is, and Maureen, don't kill me for saying this, but I feel like Wayfair is in this adult toddler stage of, we have been a startup for so long, for like 20 years, and we're a Fortune 250 organization. And so what I mean by that is that there are not some processes in place that exist at other organizations that have been around as long as us that would create some of the red tape that you're used to. And so without those, you don't have that same red tape. So it is very easy to reach out to a team, say, I have an idea, they're interested, and they say, oh, and we should talk to these other two groups as well. And then all of a sudden you're building a thing. I literally, at the end of like 6 months of being at Wayfair, not even, mentioned to our chief people officer, we really need culture, and at the time it was culture and values team and the DEI team to come together. And I don't care who owns it and if I'm reporting into somebody else, but these two things need to exist together. And she said, I want to hear more about that. We sat down, we talked about it. And then by the end of 2019, she said, in January, you'll take over culture and values as well. And I was like, cool. And I believe I know how to do that. But there are opportunities that exist because nobody else is kind of thinking about that right now, or because you seem really passionate about it and you were able to galvanize a lot of folks to move towards it. And so that's a part of our culture that I hope we never lose. There are some things about process that are really nice to have in place. And so we're working towards that too. But I think we're getting to a place where we're trying to find that right balance. But that's definitely something that for me, and I know for a lot of other folks, it's just seeing the opportunity to kind of curate your career at Wayfair has been truly remarkable.
Awesome. So I'm gonna field one more question from a candidate specifically for Kiana, and that is around if there are any special programs or opportunities for new employees or diverse employees to be sponsored or mentored as they kind of climb the corporate ladder and go into positions of leadership at Wayfair.
Yes, and I saw another question in here about increasing representation and leadership as well. So I'll try to tackle both of those. The short answer to that question is yes, there are. And so actually we've had our ERGs lead a lot of the mentorship and sponsorship opportunities because they're able to create some what's the word I'm looking for? Some pairing and things that they know really well. And we found that helps. We also have executive sponsors for each of those groups that are VP level or above. And just so you understand kind of levels at Wayfair, there's VP and then there's SVP and then there's our CEO, right? So like this right around the C-suite. The C-suite and the level right below their direct reports are the exec sponsors for those groups, and they do a lot of the mentorship and sponsorship too. And then in addition to that, my team has partnered with the talent development team, more traditionally known as learning and development, to create a scalable mentorship and sponsorship program that we're looking forward to launching next year. So there's the stuff that we have at the ERG level that still gets you that same mentorship sponsorship, but for more of a kind of bespoke, more specific or curated to you. And then there's we're trying to do that at the Wayfair level in a more structured way because it does happen and it does exist in an informal format as well. I think around the representation overall, look, when I started at Wayfair, so in July of 2019, I was hired at the associate director level. And so just, again, associate director, VP, SVP. is how it goes. Associate director, director, VP, SVP. And in 18 months, I was promoted to director. And in that time, we saw Black leadership, so 80 plus leadership, increase by 400%. When we include Latinx, the total increase in a year has been 323%. And so what we're seeing is this combination of both through recruiting and hiring, but also through career development and career progression, that we're really focused on understanding where have folks' careers stagnated, what's going on there, how are we talking about people and performance reviews, and removing and mitigating any and all of the biases that exist in systems and processes that prevent people from being able to grow and develop in their careers.
Awesome. So Kiana, let me thank you for being our keynote, and let me make the request that you maybe keep an eye on the chat for any other questions that come through specifically for you. And to our candidates, if you have more questions specifically for Kiana, please drop those questions in the chat, and then I'll ask Kiana to keep an eye on that and answer whichever one she can. Okay, so let's go into our panel discussion. So I just took down my slides intentionally so that we could focus on the beautiful faces of the Wayfair panelists that have graciously volunteered their time to share their experiences, to share what they do at Wayfair and the opportunities on their different teams. So what I like to do first, before we jump into that panel discussion, is I like to introduce each of our panelists one by one, so that you all have a little bit of context of who they are and what they do at Wayfair. So Daniel, I'd like to start with you. So Daniel Dayco, Associate Director of Operations, Site Director for Wayfair. So Daniel, if you'd like to kind of introduce yourself and maybe talk about your path to Wayfair and what you currently do at Wayfair.
Sure. I'll start with my path from to Wayfair. I was working at the time for a software company slash internet company called Shopify. Some of you might know who Shopify is. And then pandemic kind of hit, and I oversaw operations in the US, but I live in Canada. And then that kind of messed up the whole border with me being able to come into the US. So when that happened, I just became open to other opportunities. As Kiana said, my LinkedIn was up to date. Wayfair reached out for a conversation. And I just found that the conversation went somewhere that it spoke to the type of culture that was at Wayfair. Fast forward, call it 2 months from that interaction, then I started the interview process. And it was right from the interview process. I asked a lot of questions around like DEI and diversity. When I was actually going through this, it was right after the whole George Floyd thing kind of kicked off, right? And so when I was at Shopify, there was a lot of work we were doing around DEI and a bunch of stuff around that. And so I was really hard on the interviewers who were interviewing me about what Wayfair was doing and all these types of things. And they were finally like, you know what, these are great questions, Daniel. We're going to put you in touch with somebody who might be able to help better answer that. So I just liked the way they handled the way I kind of switched it around where I was interviewing Wayfair. Because I was in a comfortable role. I was doing pretty well. I didn't need to move. But it was an opportunity for me that I thought that made a lot of sense based on the culture and based on some of the initiatives, that Kiana spoke to that they were going to be essentially launching at the time. Because I joined in 2020. I think you want to know what I do here. I oversee the Mississauga FC. It's a fulfillment center. It's approximately about 1 million square feet. It essentially ships to all shipping points in Canada. And I'm going to also be overseeing our new facility that we're going to be opening up on the other side of the country, which is going to be in Vancouver. So love it here. My path here, like in terms of getting into what I would call senior leadership, wasn't always a straight line. One of the funny stories I always tell people is my background is in finance. Coming out of school, I went into investment banking, and because my father was in investment banking, and then a year or two into that, I decided I wanted to grow my hair. As you can see, I got dreads. let's just say back in 2002-ish time frame, that wasn't a popular thing. That was when I really got a little bit of culture shock, right? Because I didn't understand that, like, how you looked. Because up until that time, no one ever cared about how I looked. I was very clean cut, I looked a lot like you, brother. So when I wanted to grow my hair and I saw what a change it made to everybody at work and how it was perceived so negatively, I was like, wow, this kind of caught me off guard. But it also showed me that that was not a culture that I thought was good for me to develop in. And I didn't feel like, I thought I had a lot of talent. And I didn't feel I wanted to bless, a company like that with that kind of talent. So I started looking for places that were a little bit more inclusive. And I actually would always bring up my hair in job interviews that I was going in and being like, is my hair an issue for you? And it would make people uncomfortable. I would see it on their face. But I wanted to do that because I wanted to turn the tables a little bit, where I finally got a chance to join companies that were like, no, that's not a problem. We don't even look at that. And that's when you knew you're in the right kind of place. So I just want to kind of just state that, because like, I think Wayfair is really building a very inclusive culture. And I think that, I was blessed to be here, and it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride for the time that I've been here. In terms of what, I think I can talk about my team, right? Yeah, like I said, we oversee fulfillment, 1 million square feet. I got 4 senior managers underneath me. We also have 3 shipping DAs here, as well as 2 middle miles up here in Canada that I also oversee.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you just started with Wayfair, and was it in 2020?
Yeah, 2020, August of 2020. I've been here just over a year and a little bit.
So I got a follow-up question for you, since you have recently joined the company, and that is, what was the interview process like for you on the other end? So I know you interviewed Wayfair a lot, but if I'm a candidate and I want to learn or prepare for a potential interview with Wayfair, what advice would you give?
I'd say, do your homework. I know most folks here are already employed, but you wouldn't go into any meeting with your boss or with your colleagues that you're not prepared for. And I think sometimes in interviews, like now that I'm doing a lot of interviewing, sometimes candidates come on and they're just not prepared. They know nothing about Wayfair. They haven't done any homework. And I say, in order to keep that conversation very engaging on both sides, do a little bit of homework so you can ask some really quality questions to the person interviewing you. And I think the next piece of advice I would give was to be yourself. The worst thing you could do is to be somebody in an interview, and then when you show up on your first day, you're somebody else, because it's going to be culture shock for you, because they're not you. The place you think you're going into and the person they think you are is not going to be the same. So be yourself. Like Kiana said, like, be your true self. That's the best advice I can give you coming in.
And what type of talent do you look for and hire on your team?
On my team, I look for folks that are willing to learn. I want a continuous learning mindset. I don't want people who are just comfortable, because we're a tech company. Things are always changing. There's always, and we're also in we're in a massive growth cycle over the last, call it, 3 years. Processes, systems, tools we use, everything is changing all the time. If you're not willing to learn, you're not going to be very successful here. So that's one of the main things I look for. But then also someone who knows how to collaborate effectively. One of the things that I think the pandemic taught everybody is being able to collaborate, because now everything's Zoom, and there's a lot of projects that I've been a part of, and I've never even met the folks that I completed the projects with. If you had asked us, if you had asked everybody 5 years ago if that was possible, we all would have been like, no, it's not. But pandemic kind of made everything happen, at light speed. And I think that, being able to collaborate and being able to, work across the aisle in a different vertical is a skill set that you do well here. But
awesome. So my last question for you before I introduce our next 2 panelists, the last specific question for you is, what is it that you like most about working at Wayfair so far?
I think that it's the perfect blend of tech and call it CPG, right? Because for those of you who work for companies that I call it like a normal CPG company. You understand that when you want to do something, you want to launch a new process, you want to launch a new program, platform, it's always a long time. It's anywhere, it's usually, you got to get on the Jira board. It's between 12 to 18 months to get things done. At Wayfair, it's light speed. And as an operator, it's incredible. Like Keynote said, there's days where I'm on the floor looking at certain things. I have a concept in my head. I can get on a meeting in 2 weeks and we can already have, a pilot going on in like a month. That's like in the CPG world, that never happens. So that's the most exciting thing about being here, is because anything that you can think of, you have an opportunity to kind of make it reality. As long as you can, prove business case and do all the business school stuff that you need to do. But that's what's been the most fun about working here.
Awesome. Also, so Daniel, let me thank you for being one of our panelists. I think you gave us some awesome insight to who you are and what you do at Wayfair. And so to our candidates, if you have specific questions for Daniel, as I go ahead and introduce our next panelist, please drop those questions in the chat. And Daniel, if you could keep an eye on the chat for any questions you might be able to answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. So our next panelist is Silpa Golapalli, who's a global head of service innovation. So Silpa, if you're ready.
Thank you, Will, and really, really excited to be here. So quick introduction, as most of you probably can tell, I grew up in India, and I spent most of my first half of my life in India and moved here for college, here being the United States. Was formally educated in electrical engineering. I literally do nothing related to that today. And really, got in right after graduating from college, went into grad school, graduated grad school. So after 6 full years of studying electrical engineering, I realized this is not what I want to be doing. So classic post-graduation, joined consulting, it's the best place to start when you're not sure about where you want to be. So really had an incredible time for the first few years in consulting, got to travel, got to learn about a bunch of different things, so on and so forth. Met my then boyfriend, now husband. I was actually in Philadelphia, spent a lot of time there, went to school there, and he was in Boston. So we did this whole long distance thing for a bit. And then finally I said, you know what, I'm going to move up north. This is the most north I'm ever going to move. So I ended up moving to Boston and started interviewing and found what was then called CSN Stores and now Wayfair. So I've been at Wayfair for a little over a decade. It has been an extremely rewarding experience, personally, professionally, financially, any which way I look at it. I've got the opportunity to work on some really cool projects with some incredible people over the years. And also got to be in very different roles over the years. So very, very excited about my experiences, what I've gotten to learn, so on and so forth. And right now, for the last 12 months, I've been in customer service, leading our service innovation team and broadly, one half of our frontline service teams that are basically customer service team members who take calls, emails, and chats from our customers post-order. So it's been a super fun 12 months in this role. I also moved roles back in the middle of the pandemic. So that was very interesting. So this was the first time I didn't get to meet my new team members in person. So it was a very different onboarding, but really, really enjoyed the experience and continue to love what we do and sort of the relentless customer focus that we have as an organization, as a team, and something that sort of centers everything that we do.
So can you talk a little bit about your team? Like how large is your team and what is the makeup of your team? Like what type of talent do you look for your team?
It's a great question. So my team is roughly 1,500 folks. that are spread across North America. Some folks are virtual team members. Some of them are what we call on-premise. Obviously, everyone's virtual right now due to the pandemic. I want to say the split is roughly 60-40, right? 60% virtual, 40% on-prem. And in terms of the type of talent, we have a diverse set of roles. We have roles that are fairly analytical and sort of strategic in nature. And then we have more operations focused roles. So there's a sort of a wide set of opportunities, just given the size and the breadth of what we cover. So lots of open roles and lots of exciting opportunities.
And so for you personally, what is it that you like most about working for Wayfair?
I get asked that question a lot. I'm also one of the culture ambassadors. And I have to say it's the people. It's the people that makes the company. And it's just incredible to see the type of talent we have in the organization. And then number two, I would say is as I mentioned, the relentless customer focus. We're constantly thinking about what else can we do? How can we continue to improve upon the things that we have to drive that excellent, superior customer experience? And then I would say the last thing is, there are many other things that come to mind, but as Daniel mentioned, collaboration, right? There is, I use this phrase a lot in my team. This is not tennis, this is soccer. It's a team sport 100% all the way. And just sort of orienting the teams around it is just phenomenal.
Awesome. So Silpa, let me thank you for being one of our panelists. And if anyone has questions specifically for Silpa and what she does or what her team does as global head of service innovation, please drop those questions in the chat. And then Silpa, if you can keep an eye on the chat for any questions that you might be able to answer. So last but not least, our third panelist is Bhaskar Gowda, who's Associate Director of Partner Operations. So Bhaskar, if you can introduce yourself and speak to your path to Wayfair and what you currently do at Wayfair.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Will. I'm really excited to be here. And I've been a big proponent of Wayfair. And it's great to be talking to you all and share my experience, how I got here. And also what I do with Wayfair. First off, originally from India, I don't think there are any surprises there. Grew up for almost two and a half decades in the same city. So that's a place called Bangalore. And I moved to the US to do my MBA. So that was about 6 years ago. So before that, my undergrad was in computer science. I worked as a software engineer for about 5 years before, getting bored of being writing code on a computer. And then I decided, okay, I'm not too sure what I want to do next. So I decided to do my MBA. So I came here, landed in Pittsburgh. That was the very first time I probably lived outside of Bangalore. So I was always confined to one city throughout my life. And then Pittsburgh kind of opened things for me. That's where I did my MBA. And then 2 years immediately after, I joined Amazon in their operations program. It's called the Pathways Operations Program. It's a post-MBA program where it's more about leadership in their fulfillment centers. So I rotated through 2 different programs. And then I wanted to explore opportunities in the corporate sector, because that was the whole idea of the Pathways Operations Program. You rotate through different programs and then you get to choose whether you wanted to continue in the fulfillment center or you wanted to take up any of the supply chain roles with the corporate sector. So I think that is pretty much when I was deciding. I was in Phoenix in their almost a 1.2 million square feet building, very similar to what Daniel just described. And then, in fact, it was my college senior who was a director at that point in time here at Wayfair. I had my LinkedIn up to date as well. And he had he was quite active with recruiting for my B school. And he was with consulting back then, and he had just joined Wayfair, and he was building out a team. And he reached out, talking about Wayfair. At that point in time, I had not heard of Wayfair, even though it comes as a surprise now that I hadn't heard of Wayfair. I didn't know anything about Wayfair. This was in 2017. Again, I was very ignorant. Wayfair was already a big name, big brand name by then. But yeah, I didn't have the exposure. And maybe I was not, buying from Wayfair at that point in time. So yeah, so he reached out, he explained how Wayfair is, very innovative, building out this engine. It was a startup. I mean, it is still a startup. So I felt I was immediately able to connect. Like I was kind of already leaning towards moving to Seattle from Phoenix to join the corporate world. And then there was this great opportunity where, I could come and build my own legacy. With Amazon, it felt more like I was going to run a very well-oiled machine at that point in time. But with Wayfair, I was going to build out something new from the scratch. So I was hired to kind of, lead the transportation team. So I was in a fulfillment center, no operations background, then fulfillment center, then I moved to transportation. So Wayfair is really good at that. Like if you can show that you can really apply yourself and bring good problem solving skills, role is like your history with or your career, prior career really is not the limit. You can explore anything that you want as long as you can convince that you can bring good problem solving skills. So I moved into transportation and I joined as a senior manager. And I kind of built out my entire scope. Like I started with a team of 1 analyst. And by the time I decided to leave that role about 6 months ago, I had built a team of 13. So in a matter of 3 years, I had, 2 job roles within senior manager, and I got 1 promotion. And then 3 years down the line, I said, okay, I have learned enough about transportation. Now I want to do something else. So that's when I decided to pivot towards partner operations. So that is my current role. And I've been with that team for about 6 months. So relatively new, in a Wayfair sense. But having said that, my role is mostly on the supplier front. So I think Kiana mentioned in a keynote presentation that we have 16,000 suppliers. When I joined, it was 7,000 suppliers 3 years ago. So we have doubled that, and we are increasingly building more complexity. Now we have international supply chain. We are vertically integrated with our suppliers all the way from their factories to delivering it to the customer. So anything that has to do with managing that relationship with the supplier from an operations front, like my team would be responsible for that. So again, our team is divided into several verticals. So I manage one of the verticals, which is mattress and utility bedding. So all of the Tempur-Pedics, the Sertas, or even our Wayfair white label, which is Wayfair Sleep. So all of those ones, I pretty much manage the operation strategy for those suppliers with Wayfair.
Awesome. And are you hiring on your team? And if so, in what types of roles?
Yeah, so in fact, I have 2 senior manager roles open at the moment that I'm actively looking to hire. So it's mostly what I'm looking for is, combination of 3 things. Someone who is good, customer relentless customer focus. In my case, the customer is the supplier, but with the lens that ultimately we need to, fulfill what the end consumer wants. So how do you convince your supplier to do the right thing, which is good for them and for Wayfair, but with the lens of a consumer's priority at the top of everything. So that I would say is something that I'm very, very like looking forward as a bare minimum. And then obviously collaborate effectively, because both internally and externally, like we interact a lot with our internal supply chain teams to ensure we have the right strategy for the supplier, but also at the same time having that good experience with account management. Like, your supplier, they don't report to you, or they don't roll up under the same organization. So how do you convince them without having that authority? You need good collaboration skills. So that is something that I would say is another key point that I'm looking to. And then obviously the third one is a bit of the analytical approach, meaning like we are always launching some new program all the time. So there is a very good chance that you will not know everything when you begin, and that is perfectly okay. But if you don't know how to go about solving the unknown, then I would be worried. So basically looking for bringing good problem solving skills, like even if you have not had any experience in leading supplier calls or managing supply chain, all we are looking for is good problem solving skills. If you can bring that analytical approach to solving, like problems of tomorrow, that is precisely what I would be looking for.
Awesome, awesome. So what I like to do now, and thank you, Bhaskar, for being one of our panelists as well. So now that we've introduced all of our panelists, I like to ask a few questions in a panel discussion format, but considering time as well, we've got about 20 more minutes before I introduce Maureen to talk about next steps. In those 20 minutes, I'm going to ask a few questions to our panelists, but then I'm going to invite you as candidates, because I'm seeing some really good questions in the chat. I'm going to invite you as candidates to ask questions in the chat that you would like for me to ask our panelists, but I'll go ahead and start or kick off the discussion with one of the questions that I prepared that I think the candidates might find interesting. And so that first question to our panelists is, what are some of the most exciting aspects, projects, or initiatives of your current role? So I'll default this one to Daniel, but feel free to add to it, Silpa or Bhaskar. Sure.
I think for me, we got a couple cool initiatives. One obviously is a new FC that's going to be open in Canada, which I'm a part of that. And it's been from figuring out where it's going to go all the way to what's going to look like, what's going in it, all that stuff. So that's really cool. And then also some cool WMS initiatives that we're going to be launching and we're currently launching. I think those two things are really cool.
Silpa or Bhaskar, did you want to add in?
Yeah, I can jump in really quick. There are a number of obviously, given I'm in the customer facing sort of side of the world, a couple of really interesting projects, one of which is routing. So we've built our own internal routing engine that will allow us to identify customer, what kind of order have they placed, where in the order life cycle is it? Is it pre-delivery? Is it post-delivery? Based on all of those attributes, we're working on routing that said call or contact to an agent or a consultant who is particularly good at handling that type of issue, right? So basically connecting supply and demand in such a way that the overall customer outcomes are significantly better. So it's a combination of both routing and specialization. It's very interesting because it's 100% homegrown. It's a data science model that we're building along with all of the technology infrastructure to implement it. We've done a few pilots. We've seen some really cool results. For example, we've identified a certain cohort of customers who are placing orders on one of our brands. When we are able to route those calls to a certain team who's trained a certain way, we're seeing roughly 4 to 5 percentage points higher customer experience outcomes, which typically takes a really long time to otherwise deliver those kinds of results. So very, very excited about that. And the other initiative that comes to mind is what we call customer happiness, which is really trying to stitch together all of the different data points that we receive from our customers on their experience across the entire value chain, and deliver and create insights from those and share with the appropriate departments across Wayfair to influence their roadmaps, all in the interest of driving superior customer experience. Again, very, very data rich and very, very interesting from the kind of impact we think we're going to have from that.
Awesome. So this next question I'll ask to Bhaskar, and then I'm going to pull a couple of questions that I'm seeing in the chat as well. But Bhaskar, I understand that internal mobility is encouraged at Wayfair, and many employees have experienced the Wayfair jungle gym. Can you share your experience with internal mobility at Wayfair?
Yeah, sure. I think I probably touched on in my journey here in Wayfair. So yeah, like when I joined, I was basically confined to one portion of transportation, one leg in domestic transportation, which was middle mile. But I was able to expand that to include a small parcel delivery also, which is like a delivery with FedEx and UPS, which was a completely different organization. But like I was able to pivot towards that, look into those aspects, bring those transferable skills, and my manager was very, very supportive when I basically said, hey, like I think I've learned this aspect. This is where I need to lean in. And my manager was the one who actually put me in touch with that specific team that I was interested in. So I think that's the best part about Wayfair. And I've done that 2 times. I moved from transportation, left that org completely, and then moved to a partner operations org, which again has no overlap with transportation directly. And in both instances, like I was talking to a different team altogether. I obviously had to show that I could bring those transferable skills, those problem solving skills, and apply in a different setup. But having said that, that is something that Wayfair really celebrates. Like we know that people do get or do want change. Instead of letting them go, like this is something that's a win-win. Like you are already aligned on the ecosystem of Wayfair. You know the recipe, how Wayfair works. Now you just need to apply it to a different problem. Wayfair really understands that, encourages that. And I don't believe like any other company is as open for internal mobility as Wayfair is. And I'm a good example, having done that like 3 times in a matter of 3.5 years with Wayfair.
Awesome. So this is going to be a 2-part question part of it's from the chat. Actually, both parts of the question are from the chat. And I think I'm going to default this question to Daniel. And that is, the question is around fulfillment centers at Wayfair. One part of the question is, how many associates are typically in a fulfillment center? So like the size of a fulfillment center, and then where are the fulfillment centers located strategically for Wayfair? I think.
Sorry, I couldn't get out. I was having problems with my mute button there. Sure. So I thought I'd answer that in the chat, but I'll tell you, it depends on the size of FC. Because we essentially have 3 types of facilities. We have our ACOs, we have our middle miles, and we have our FCs. And then I guess there's 4, because we could say we also have co-located facilities, which have all 3 in one, similar to what I oversee. They can have anywhere between 100 up to 700 folks, depending on time of year and depending on what type of facility it is. Some of our facilities are just for large parcel, some are just for small parcel, some are for all. So depending on the type of facility, again, I'd say anywhere between 100 to up to 700 people. And also depending on the time of year. When we can go through our high volume events, such as C5, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or Way Day, in the spring, we tend to flex up our volume so much that we do have to bring in some additional help, i.e. seasonal and temp associates, because I know that question was in there too. So I thought I'd answer that too, in case that's in there.
And then where are the strategic locations for the fulfillment centers?
We have locations that are by the ports. Those typically are kind of induction facilities. But then we also have locations in the central U.S., the eastern U.S., and the western part of the U.S. And then the two that we're going to be the one in Mississauga that I oversee, then also the one that we're building in Vancouver, which will be bookend Canada essentially to fulfill the entire country.
Awesome. So my next question is also a live Q&A question from the chat from Crystal. And she's curious about what surprised you most when you joined Wayfair and what excites you about your work at Wayfair. So I'll default this one to Silpa and then Bhaskar.
I think what surprised me 10 years ago and what continues to surprise me is our agility with which we move. As you guys probably saw, one of our people principles is deliver results with agility. And I think Daniel mentioned as well, you think up a concept and 2 weeks later, you're running a pilot, 4 weeks later, you saw the results. And you're now talking about how do we implement this across the network, and boom, 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 it's done. When I tell a lot of new hires that we work at a lightning speed, I don't believe folks fully understand what that means. And typically 60 days in, I always get the same comment, which is, we didn't quite understand what you meant when you said you move fast. This is like you guys are on steroids. And I'm like, yeah, and it gets really, really addictive for someone who's been here 10 years. This is all I know now, right? This is the norm. And it's really exciting to see how we can have an impact, how we can change customer experience, how we can positively drive employee experience so quickly without waiting and going through all kinds of red tape. I think that's something that Kiana alluded to earlier in the conversation as well. To me, that's the most exciting piece. And it was, 10 years ago, we were what, 500 million in revenue, 1,500 people across the company, 2 offices. Fast forward to today, Fortune 250, over 15,000 employees, completely different scale, yet we have managed to retain that agility, and that's no easy task, right? And that's just, we managed to do it, and we're very, very proud of it.
Awesome. So this next question I'm gonna pose to Bhaskar. What advice can you offer candidates interviewing with Wayfair that want to maximize their chances of being hired?
Yeah, no, I think, first and foremost, I think Daniel covered some of those points already. I think, like, do your research, like know about the company. It's a two-way interview. Like, one, you're basically interviewing, or the company is interviewing you to basically understand, like, if you fit the bill, if it's a good fit, like you have the skills necessary to make an impact with the firm. And then obviously it's the other way is basically you need to know if you fit into the culture, which is very open, which encourages internal mobility. But at the same time, it is very entrepreneurial, meaning like you need to be, quite brave to come up with ideas, not hold yourself back and push through, because that is something that Wayfair really encourages. So do your research, because it's a very fast moving company, fast growing company, and it is expanding in several different strategic avenues. So look at all those things and come prepared for the interview. That's the very first one. And then the second one is obviously, know the principles. Now that you have the head start that Kiana shared, those 3 triads, basically we drive results, we collaborate effectively. And then the third one is basically we are always improving. So those 3 pillars, like if you are able to demonstrate that you can do, for any problem, then like that's pretty much how you would get your foot in the door.
Awesome. Thank you, Bhaskar. So I'm seeing some questions in the chat around locations specific to where there are opportunities and where you work. So what I want to do, I know Daniel, you're in Canada, but Silpa and Bhaskar, where are you currently located in what city?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. I was based in Boston until 4 weeks ago and just moved to Washington, D.C.
Was that, are you working remote or was that to be?
Yes, I am working remotely, but I do plan to go back to Boston every 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks.
And Bhaskar, where are you located or working from?
I have stayed put in Boston. So been in Boston throughout, like in the headquarters. It's currently flexible because of the COVID situation. You don't need to go in, so I'm actually working from home.
Okay.
But we can go into the office if we want to.
So I'm going to put this this heavy lift on you, Bhaskar. So I know Wayfair's headquarters is in the Boston area, correct? So what would be your pitch? What is it that you like most about living in that area, and maybe any pleasant surprises when you had to relocate to that area to work at Wayfair?
So yeah, I had a very interesting story when I moved to Boston. So I moved to Boston to join Wayfair. So I was confused between either Seattle or Boston. I chose Boston. And I haven't repented one bit. The best thing about Boston is the great culture it's got. Like, it's I would say it's a hybrid between a very big city and you still have a good town, small town feeling because the city is not that big as compared to say a New York or LA. And then it's got some nice, very interesting or very top-notch colleges, which means the crowd is awesome. Like there is a lot of diversity. There's a lot of openness in the city itself. The second benefit is obviously the food. Food is awesome. Like you get all cuisines. Seafood is great. Italian food is great. Like you name it, you get it. So that's the second benefit. Third one is obviously, I used to have a car in Phoenix when I was going to work, or I needed it every single day to do every little small thing. Here in Boston, like I don't need a car. Like in fact, that's an expenditure. The transport within the city is fantastic. Like it's like something that I believe is a blessing because I don't need to waste as much time. Again, right now, because we are all working from home, that wouldn't be a pain point, but it could be a pain point, once things start opening up. But the Boston office, because it's so centrally located, it's right in the middle of the city, and it's right in the middle of all the metro stations or the metro rail. Which is the T here. It's so easy to get into the office. So those would be the three main benefits that I would say living in Boston, coming into the Boston headquarters.
Awesome. So to all of our candidates, Wayfair is headquartered in Boston. So, if you need a few more reasons to move to Boston, other than to have a great career opportunity potentially with Wayfair, there are lots of opportunities, of course, at their headquarters. But then there are also some operational and fulfillment center opportunities in different parts of the country. So Bhaskar, thank you for sharing those selling points. So we've got a couple more minutes for questions, and then I'm going to hand it over to Maureen to talk about next steps. So to our candidates, if you have any last minute questions that you'd like for me to ask, please drop those questions in the chat. And I did see a question about because Wayfair moved so quickly to implement new processes and to be more efficient and that kind of thing. What are some of the methodologies that are utilized? So for example, I see one question around, is Agile used or ITIL? So I'm not sure who would be the best person on the panel to address that, but wanted to pose that question on behalf of our candidates.
Happy to jump in. So we use Agile on 100% and do that for software development. We do that for some of the internal projects that are not all technology based as well. That is also one of the reasons why we're able to be as nimble, right? So we're working in 2-week sprints. So we're able to sort of really break the problem down into smaller components and make sure that, you know, we're sort of demonstrating progress all along the way. Because there have been initiatives where, you know, sometimes you start out to build a ship, but, you know, 8 months in, what you ended up with is a train, and you're like, kind of not sure how we got here. So we're very, very careful and thoughtful in how we sort of manage our processes, so that type of thing doesn't happen, because it's very, very expensive to go through something like that.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that one. So here's what I'd like to do now. So I'm seeing a lot of questions from our candidates in the chat around next steps and, you know, where they can find the opportunities in the different groups, that kind of thing. So I want to do 2 things. One, I want to hand it over to Maureen to talk about next steps. But then Daniel, I'll ask for you, since our keynote had to drop off the call, maybe you can give last words of encouragement before we go. So we'll let Maureen do, you know, next steps, and then I'll give you the last couple of minutes.
No problem.
Okay, so Maureen, I'm going to pull up my slides really quick, and let me introduce Maureen, who's a recruiting manager at Wayfair. So all those questions you guys have been asking related to next steps and that kind of thing, Maureen can touch on that. But let me introduce Maureen Gilroy, recruiting manager at Wayfair.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will, and thank you to Kiana and all the panelists. Tonight's event has been incredible. I've had the joy to work alongside Tamika and Will to put on this event, and I never imagined it would be such an engaging discussion. So really, really excited for our first event with HBCU Connect. So yes, I'm Maureen Gilroy. I'm a recruiting manager here at Wayfair. I sit on our campus and programmatic hiring team. And within that space, I specifically focus on our inclusion partnerships and oversee our recruiting events team as well. So I am also someone who has navigated the Wayfair internal jungle gym alongside a lot of the folks that you heard from tonight. I have been on the campus team for about 2 years, though, within talent acquisition. I've worked very closely with Megan Overdorf, who is a recruiting manager in partner operations specifically, and unfortunately, due to some power outages, could not attend this evening's call, but Megan has been a huge partner putting on this event, so thank you to Megan. In terms of my favorite people principles, they actually also coincide with what I enjoy about working here. So it is the collaboration and the being an owner. I think it is very much Wayfair is an environment. You get autonomy pretty quickly, and you can see the impact of your efforts fairly quickly. And I think that is very motivating and keeps us all going. And then the collaboration, you get to work alongside a lot of smart, driven people with various perspectives. And you're actually really encouraged to share your thoughts, your insights, ideas. And no matter like how long you've been here, no matter what level you are, everyone is very receptive and wants to hear your ideas. So I think those are the 2 main people principles, as well as the things I enjoy about working at Wayfair and what keeps me here. So if we go in to the featured jobs, so on the left-hand side, you will see our high priority, some initial featured jobs across sales and operations. That being said, as you have heard from the panel tonight, Wayfair is a fast-growing company. There are always new jobs being added. So those are just some initial ones. The sales and operations team at Wayfair, and you've heard from multiple different panelists across the team here tonight, but it is comprised of functions from partner operations, supply chain, including an international and North American supply chain, sales, service, and operations performance management. Please take a look on the next slide. There is a link, and I actually put it in the chat as well. There is a specific landing page we have put together for a general sales and operations application if you do not know what specific role you may want to apply for. And our recruiting team will review that and reach out to you to get a better sense after reviewing your profile around what type role or what type team you may be the best fit for. But that being said, on that general application link, there are also specific links to those featured roles that were on the previous slide. So some of those featured priority roles include field and remote opportunities in Georgia, Florida, Texas, and then the ones in our Boston headquarters as well. So there are a variety of open roles, but all of those can be linked to from the landing page, the general interest application. And then also on that application, there is a click here to see all of Wayfair jobs. So that isn't just sales and operations roles, but that is across commercial, across tech or tech org as well. So please leverage that link. That should give you everything as general and then as specific as you might want to apply for, but also please do submit the Google form we have put in the chat. And I know there's a QR code, I think maybe on the next page if you want to use your phone to scan it. But we are very, very excited that you all took time out of your Wednesday evening to learn a bit more about Wayfair. I know I really enjoyed it. I want to give a huge thank you to HBCU Connect, to our panelists, as well as to Kiana and Megan for helping put this event on. But with that, I want to hand it back to Daniel to give his words of wisdom, advice for all of you.
That's great. Thanks for that, Maureen. Okay, first I want to start off by just saying thank you. Like Maureen said, I really appreciate this opportunity and that we all had to, talk to you guys about Wayfair and about some of the opportunities, but also just to kind of like talk about our culture and what it's like to work here. I think it's important sometimes to get that look in and to understand, essentially what the company's really about. And I can tell you that Wayfair is definitely a company that walks the walk. I'm part of a larger DEI committee from the operations team. And one of the things I love is that they put me in a role where I get to kind of hold senior leadership accountable to some of the things we're trying to do from a DEI perspective. And not a lot of companies will do that. A lot of times they just put some nice posters up, send a couple flowery emails, and that's sort of essentially their commitment to DEI. And I just want to state that this is really a company that walks the walk. One last thing I want to touch on, and I think this is great advice that I got early in my career, and I want to give this to everybody. And Kiana kind of talked a little bit about this as well, and that is get comfortable being uncomfortable. That is the best advice a senior leader's ever given me, because we all get put in situations like, hey, tomorrow you're gonna have to give this presentation. Hey, tomorrow I need you to get this done, whatever. And it always, you get that feeling in your stomach, it gets you the butterflies, the nervousness. Learn how to harness that, learn how to become easy with that. Once you do that, nothing's gonna stand in your way in terms of things you can do at work. It just really changes the game for you. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a really big thing. And then the last thing I just want to say is please try and apply for some of these roles. I think Wayfair reaching out to the HBCU community, that's a big deal. And I remember when I worked for Shopify, I went to Memphis this one time, and I was a regional role. So one of the folks that worked with me oversaw a building in Memphis. When I walked in the building, it was incredible to me that people couldn't believe that I was the regional director. They saw a guy with dreads. I think they were like, no way, that cannot be the guy. And it just showed me that we still got a lot of work to do to convince a lot of people that we can be a lot of bigger things. So please, you guys have done the first step. You're very educated. Second step, get into a progressive company. Wayfair is definitely a progressive company. There's lots of room for growth here. It's like a rocket ship right now. Get in now. That's the best thing I can say.
Love it. Knocked it out of the park. Okay, so I want to thank the Wayfair team, but to our candidates, a lot of you guys connected to the call and had your video on and you had your suits and ties and everything. So now's your opportunity to go ahead and turn your video back on, because I love to get a photo or a snapshot of everybody's smiling face before we end the event. So if you guys want to turn on your video feeds and give me a smile here, we will get that snapshot and then we'll let everyone go. So if you can turn on your video feed for me, because a lot of you guys, we had to ask you politely to turn them off. Now's your chance. But I want to thank also, everyone that has taken the time out to attend this event, because like I said, if you guys don't come to the events, we can't do this. We can't bring these opportunities to you and continue to bring these opportunities to more and more people within our particular community. So thank you all for making this happen. Thank you to the Wayfair team for volunteering your time to be panelists. I know it's after hours for most of you, so we really appreciate that. And thank you to Maureen and your team for reaching out to us in the first place to partner on this event. All right, so everybody say cheese. I'm going to go ahead and get a screenshot of all of your smiling faces. So 1, 2, 3, cheese. All right, so I want to thank everyone. Appreciate you guys joining today's event, and have a great evening, and look for a follow-up email from us with those next steps instructions. All right, thanks to everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.